Have you heard anything about your job status, and what are your thoughts just on the rumors?
No, I haven't heard anything about my job status. I haven't heard anything about yours either.
Do you think there was a chance this could have been your last game as a Vikings coach?
Not my choice, not my decision.
Mike, what are you most proud of when you look back at the 8 years that you've been here?
Let's not go there today. You want to talk about it tomorrow? Let's talk about it tomorrow. But this isn't time to collect for 8 years.
And tomorrow, as in today, brought an end to the Mike Zimmer, Rick Spielman era as coach and GM respectively in Minnesota. It's that time of year, and the news came fast and furious this morning. Joining Jacksonville and technically Las Vegas, they have an interim coach. And then Denver, over the weekend, we saw both Minnesota and Chicago clean house. And Charles Robinson, we know you've been working the phones all day. Before we get to the people who were dismissed, specifically Brian Flores, which is probably the most shocking development of the day. Shocking to some, you probably, I'm sure, had an inkling that it might be coming. I want to talk about who might be next. Joe Judge, it's a shocker that he's still employed as we speak and seems to be safe in New York with his QB sneaking from inside the 10-yard line ass. David Culley reportedly could be one and done. We'll see where that goes in Houston. Pete Carroll has a big buyout. Both he and John Schneider have a big buyout in Seattle, but there's a lot of, winds of change seems to be blowing in the Pacific Northwest. And then Matt Rule reportedly has to hire a superstar offensive coordinator as he goes into 2022. I set all that up to ask you quite simply, is there another surprise on the horizon when it comes to the coaching carousel?
I don't expect that there's another surprise. I mean, you mentioned the group that's still, safe-ish. Holley, I had a conversation with someone in the Houston organization a couple of days ago prior to this weekend's game, and he said, I don't know, it feels pretty good in the org with him right now, and he didn't want to guarantee that David would have a job, after the season finale, and I definitely got the sense that it's going to depend on whether or not there's just another coach out there, an opportunity for them to go and hire someone that they absolutely can't pass up. And
Josh McDaniels,
they might do that. I don't know if it's Josh McDaniels. I don't know if I don't think it would be Gerard Mayo, but that's another guy from inside that organization that, you guys asked me, it was interesting. You asked me last week if there was sort of a dark horse candidate out there, maybe someone that a lot of people weren't talking about. And after we talked and I had some additional phone calls, Mayo's name came up a couple of times, and to the point where I actually ended up mentioning it on our podcast. And you kind of get the game. You pod to win the game.
Download it, subscribe.
But yeah, that was the guy. That was the guy who
stars.
came up. It was interesting. I don't know Mayo. Like I've had limited interactions with him, and it goes back to when he's a player, so it's been a really long time. But you definitely get the feel that this is more, when you talk about the Belichick tree, this is more under like sort of the Vrabel mold. Like we're going to bring in a player that can inspire, lead. So obviously some of the things we were hearing about Brian Flores before he got the Miami job, but he is definitely a name that is now I'm seeing like, okay, there's actual requests going in.
Yeah. Mayo's interviewing in Denver, I believe. Yeah.
Yeah. Denver's already requested him. I think he's going to get more than one. Joe Judge he's met with the team and the staff. So at this point, if you were to fire Judge after allowing him to meet with the team and the staff, I don't know what's changed after we saw what is a kneel down, by the way. It was a kneel down at the 4-yard line. The only reason they didn't kneel down was because they didn't want people saying kneel down. So they did a quarterback sneak. But one of the worst things I think I've ever seen a coach do in terms of just giving up on trusting his team at all. Yeah, but other than that, I don't, the Pete Carroll one is interesting to me because I actually had a couple of league guys call me asking for numbers to individuals adjacent to Pete Carroll. And I was like, is Pete out? I'm like, is there some reason? Are you like setting up an interview with Pete, or is this a trade setup or something like that? And I was told no, but it's always interesting when someone who's, employed and not necessarily on the hot seat, you start to get other individuals in the league who are asking who represents them. Like who, I'm needing some numbers close to Pete Carroll, but I think they're still going to try to put things back together in Seattle. They're going to give it, a month to at least before free agency to really look at it. So, I think that's pretty much it. Flo, I feel like Flo was the big surprise. Now, if Jim Harbaugh is serious about leaving Michigan, I would expect that he doesn't just trounce on a job immediately, whether it's, Mark Davis looking to bring him back into the fold with the Raiders, or whether it's, Stephen Ross saying, hey, okay, I know I said I wasn't going to take him away from Michigan, but if he's leaving, let's have that conversation. I think Harbaugh, before Harbaugh went anywhere, I think Harbaugh would say, okay, let's let it know. I think they've already kind of done that. Like, he's listening. So get your pitch in at this point for Jim Harbaugh if you're really interested.
So a couple quick things. I do know Gerard Mayo, and I'm telling you, it's not just Mike Vrabel. Mayo is going to have that Mike Tomlin effect on some organization where they're going to bring him in and they're going to think, hey, this is a good young guy to know, and he is going to blow them away. He is one of the best leaders I've ever been around. I've seen him just command a room as a player, as a broadcaster. He was my co-host at one point, as a broadcaster and as a coach. So keep that in mind. He goes for an interview. He's going to come away with a job. Somebody's not going to let him leave their facility.
And Shalise Monza-Young was on with me on the podcast on Wednesday. She guested with me, and I brought him up. And she said, well, okay, let me tell you about Gerard Mayo. Like, this is somebody that I actually covered on the beat. And I think the takeaway for me was, like, this is a grown-ass man. Like, he's a serious person, but he is a leader. He's got a family. Yeah. Like, he is coming there to be, like you said, almost Tomlin-esque. Like, I'm coming in here. We're going to establish a culture. This is going to be about winning. I'm going to be – you're not going to – have me out doing this or doing that. It's going to be about football 100% of the time. And frankly, like, that's one of the underrated great things about Tomlin is you hear almost nothing about Mike Tomlin other than the job he's doing, the culture he's building, and everything that he's pouring into Pittsburgh, as long as Mike Tomlin's been there.
Now, Charles, I know we both want to ask you about Brian Flores, but before we get to that point, I just want to look. I think Mike Smith said to you that, of course, you're at the cookout. He don't know if he can have you on the grill, but you're at the cookout. So since you're at the cookout, let's have a cookout conversation, brother. And can you understand why some folks of a certain hue might be a little cynical when we already saw Steve Wilkes one and done a few years ago. David Culley is mentioned as a one and done, knowing that he came into a situation that we all thought was impossible, knowing that he wasn't going to have Deshaun Watson, develops a young quarterback who was like a second or third round pick, right? And who's Davis Mills. They like him. So help us out here, because they say it's not, you're not really paranoid if somebody really is after you. What the hell's going on here? What should black folks think when these things are happening? Do you understand what I'm saying?
Not only that, Anthony Lynn out as a coordinator after being given by Detroit, to work with. I mean, like the wide receiving core. I mean, there was, injuries, all these different things. I think it even goes to the coordinator position. But yeah, I would. Here's the one that really, the totality of it bothers me. And you asked me before, like, what's going to change, or is it going to change? And I just don't know what the change agent is, because the last change agent was let's give you prizes. And I never thought that was a good idea. I think it's a top-down change. I've always said ownership. Let's start to change how ownership looks in the building. And let's, it's until that happens to me, until there's an actual minority face that's not Shad Khan, and obviously the Ford family, you have female ownership, obviously but I'm talking about someone that reflects the vast majority of the percentage of players on the field. Okay, we're going to what are we going to do? Another 100 years without having a representative at the table who reflects a different part of that locker room than that's already there. But look, that said, the one that bothers me a lot is David Culley. Okay. And to me, if Culley gets fired after one season, he was literally just hired to be a placeholder. because he came in, everyone talked about the age, the fact that he hadn't had coordinating experience, hadn't had a head coaching experience. But we were sold on his ability to motivate, reach people, connect. Well, what did he do when he came in? I thought he did that. I was like, I think he did a pretty good job.
And then he played hard for him.
Played hard for the vast majority of the season. Played hard for him. You know, like they got thumped a couple of times here and there. It definitely happened. But I mean, even playing the Titans. I mean, look, they took the Titans all the way. I'm like, this is great. This is good for him. And again, when I spoke to the person in the organization where he said, look, it feels like it's, you know, pretty good environment right now with him. But he just didn't want to make promises because he knows there could become a coach available that changes things. But if he's fired, to me, I'm just like, okay, well, then David Culley was literally just hired to mind the store for a year. And then knowing like, hey, it was never really a serious hiring. We're never giving him a serious shot. He was going to be here for the tear down and the destruction of it. And it's like he's a nicer Hugh Jackson. You know, like he's like the guy who's like going to come in and see it get destroyed and rebuilt, but he's not going to come out the other side going, they destroyed it and rebuilt it. They basically killed my shot to win games here. Culley won't do that. But I mean, it's that to me is just another new wrinkle that probably isn't getting enough attention. Now, he hasn't been let go yet, but I think if he gets let go, people really should have that conversation about, oh, now we're hiring a guy like David Culley literally with the intention of not keeping him, because it's not like they thought, really, do they think they had a playoff team this year? We know that wasn't the case.
Yeah. But then again, the alternative is for a guy like Culley, a career assistant, to say no to the job. So damn if you do, damn if you don't in some instances.
But Mike, you can't. Like, that's the thing, is that people, right. you can't, particularly, you know, someone of Culley's stature who's been in the league for so long, we're talking about decades, right. A person, even if someone turns to David Culley and says, hey man, that is probably only one.
We talked about it last offseason, that it wasn't a good job for him. It wasn't a good situation for him. But what was he supposed to do? Say no?
Take your shot and hope that you can change something inside. So,
we'll get you out on this, man. We'll get you out between the lines and on the field. Scariest wild card in the AFC.
Okay, I knew you were going to ask me this. I should have had this pulled up.
Vegas, New England, or Pittsburgh?
I think it's Vegas because they are playing. They had a point where they could have just fallen off the planet under Rich Bisaccia. Okay, the number of things from John Gruden to Henry Ruggs to you have a first round pick you have to cut because he's waving a gun on his on a social media account. A bunch of losses. There have been injuries, and then they go into a game against the Chargers without Darren Waller. Okay, it's not like they were they were fully healthy. They didn't have a 52-man deck, and to fight the way that they fought, and to win a game like that, where it's one of those games where it's one of two things is going to happen. Either it just took so much out of you that you go into the playoffs and then there's like a letdown game, or you feel invigorated, like we can beat the world. We just took this team to overtime in the last game of the year. We made this decision. Granted, there was a timeout. Were we going to run it? We picked up whatever. It doesn't matter. You kicked the field goal and did the right thing, by the way, by NFL standards, to not let a divisional rival just sit and roll into the playoffs, right? Like, I was like, good for you, not just letting a team in your division that's a rival roll into the playoffs with you. So I like that the Raiders are going in on a high note and feeling themselves right now. I'd be a little afraid to play them.
Charles Robinson, we appreciate you, brother. Thank you so much. We will see you next week. We'll see what happened, man. It was already a wild Monday. A lot can change. Life comes at you fast. A week ago, well, they were coming off the loss to the Titans, but it wasn't that long ago. Brian Flores in the Coach of the Year conversation. Now he's coaching somewhere else. Crazy.
Maybe.
We'll see. He could be getting. I mean, he could be getting calls pretty quickly. So
I think, honestly, Charles, I could see a Deshaun Flores package deal somewhere else.
I don't see that being I do think that's a definite possibility, especially now that the Dolphins have kind of clapped and been like, okay, I guess we're out on that for good.
Yeah. All right, man. We'll talk to you.
Okay. Thanks, Jens.
Hey, thanks for watching Brother from Another on YouTube. Make sure you hit subscribe before you leave, and be sure to watch us 3 to 5 p.m. Eastern Time on Peacock. Appreciate you.